Hello, everyone. It's a great day to be in the insurance claims industry. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of The Practical Adjuster brought to you by FreeClaimInfo.com. My name's Jerry Adair. Today we're going to be discussing the topic of scene investigations for an automobile accident. The first thing we're going to talk about is the purpose of this project, the scene investigation. Why are you doing this? If you don't know that information, maybe you need to stop and consider that before you drive out to an accident scene and start doing some work. So the first thing you want to think about is you're going to be out there searching for evidence. Okay, so put your investigator cap on. When you get there, you're looking for things, specific things. You should have a pretty good idea of the accident details, or at least what's been reported to you thus far. So you're out there to try to find supporting evidence that would either support the version that you've been presented or maybe disputes that. That's what you're looking for, evidence. Now, so you're going to establish the factual data of the scene. That's going to be the roadway, which roads are, which direction they go, how many lanes are on each roadway. That's factual data, okay? Measurement of the lanes, all that kind of stuff, traffic lights, traffic control, speed limit, that kind of thing. And the next thing you're going to try to do while you're there is you're going to identify potential witnesses. So you might want to canvass the area, look for businesses and homes in the area, see whatever you can find, any place you look and see that's in somewhat reasonable proximity. Knock on some doors, see if you can find somebody that saw anything that maybe can help you complete your assignment. If you've watched any of the other videos we've produced, you probably already know that I'm fanatical when it comes to preparation. I don't think there's any point in doing any project unless you're prepared to do that. And an accident scene investigation is no different. So you should become very familiar with the facts before you head out there. It's probably a good idea to try to do your statements before you go if you can. Certainly you want to try to get the accident report from the police agency if they did that, or any other agency that did a report. If you've gotten some photographs that the police took, try to get those. If you got some photographs, maybe your insured driver or the other driver provided to you of their vehicles at the accident scene, things that would give you a little perspective, absolutely try to get those together. So piece that information together, see if there's anything else that you might need to give you a good perspective on the scene. So when you get out there, you have an idea of what you're looking for. You know what facts you want to find to confirm or dispute whatever you've been told or presented thus far. So that's a good part of the scene investigation, is to be prepared when you get there. When I arrive at the scene, I have a plan in place for what I want to do. So I don't jump out of my car and start taking pictures right away. For me personally, I prefer to take my time and walk the scene all around. Maybe get a really good perspective of what I'm looking at. So may walk up and down the roadways. I've probably already got the information on the direction that the two vehicles came from. So I'm going to kind of look, and maybe I may drive my car from those different directions, see what they saw from the vantage point of a driver's seat. And then I'll get out and kind of walk the scene, looking around, just see if anything jumps out at me before I start getting down to the details of what I'm doing. I want to have the perspective of both drivers. If there's a traffic light, I'm probably going to examine the traffic light sequence and that kind of stuff first. So, you get the timing on each of the lights, what order they come in. When this light is green, what's the other direction? Is that light red? Does it have a red arrow, turn arrow, any of that kind of stuff? So that's part of what I'm going to do, just to kind of get a good overall perspective of the accident scene before I get down to the nuts and bolts of examining it, measuring it, and documenting it. Now, preparing your scene, once you get through with the familiarization, you're going to start out with doing your orientation. So you want to know north, south, east, and west. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me to review a scene investigation that somebody has performed where they didn't establish that information right up front. What's north, south, and east, and west? When you're trying to convey information between parties and you don't know what's north, south, east, or west, it's really hard to get people to talk on the same page because not everyone knows their orientation. So you can help them by having that information when you're interviewing people. But certainly when you put that scene investigation together, or that sketch, that diagram, you absolutely need that information. So if you don't have a compass. You should have something in most cars now, your cell phone, that will help you establish that right away. So I always do mine the same way, where I got my north on the top, south, east, and west. That's just the way I do it. It's protocol for me. Now, I want to draw all the roads and the lanes of each road, directions they go. If there's some lanes that go straight, some are designated for left turn only, things of that nature. I want to document that. I want to document the lines out in the intersection. You know, you have these big, fat, white lines that go across where the intersection starts. I want to put all that in my sketch diagram. I want to identify where I see some marks, some gouge marks. If I see the point of impact, I can actually establish that with gouge marks or some other evidence. I want to put that on my diagram. If I see where the vehicle's keen to rest and I can establish that, I want that on my diagram as well. So it's all laid out there to give you a good big picture when you go back and you put it all together. Now, you've already been to the diagram, been to the scene, you have your diagram sketched out and your handwriting. Now it's time to do your measurements. And I like to do my diagram first, so then I know I have a place to put all the measurements and I'm not doing both at the same time. So I've got my sketch, I'm walking around measuring things. So I'm going to measure all the lanes. I'm going to put that information in my diagram so I know if each lane is the same, or maybe one lane's more narrow than the other. I want to have that information, okay? If there are some intersection lines, I'm going to measure those where they're at. I'm going to identify marks, gouge marks, skid marks, things of that nature. Now, when you measure those kind of things, you want to measure them from 2 points of reference. The reason for that is that if you just measure something, and let's say it's a skid mark, and you say it's 10 feet 6 inches from the center line of the roadway, okay? Well, that's a subjective number, because where on the center roadway do you measure it? Is it 10 feet from the intersection? Is it 50 feet? So you got to have 2 points of reference. So what I like to do is measure at an angle. Find you some permanent reference, maybe a utility pole that has a number on it. Maybe you could use a large tree. Make sure it's a large one that's not going anyplace, but that might be a reasonable reference point. There's a stop sign, speed limit sign, street sign, fire hydrant, anything of that nature. Try to identify a couple of those, maybe on different roadsides. So you can measure from one side, it's 38 feet 6 inches southeast of this fire hydrant, and then it's also 26 feet 4 inches north of this street sign, okay? If you do that, then you go back later, or if someone else follows behind you, the defense attorney, reconstruction expert, anyone else that goes out there, they can follow your notes and get the exact same spot that you're trying to reference. So they don't have to guess at the place you were talking about. They can use your notes to find that spot. You want to also do the same thing when you're finding the point of impact. Try to identify at least 2 points of reference to measure that from. Same thing on the points of rest for each vehicle. And you want to be specific about the position of the car or the tire. Try to figure out whether this is a right tire, left tire, that kind of thing. If you're looking at a tire mark and you're measuring for that. Again, you're doing these to help you place that vehicle in an exact position for the purpose of evaluating the whole scenario of this accident. So the more information you can get, the better. Anything you want to take a picture of out there, if you can measure it, take a picture while you're measuring it. That helps as well. If you got a small item you want to measure, put something to give you some perspective in your photograph. Photography is how we go about documenting or proving what we've determined while we're at the accident scene. So it's critically important that we do a thorough job of that. And we don't just walk around snapping pictures with no purpose and then throwing them together in some manner that doesn't make sense. No, you want to do those in some kind of a practical order. You can decide what works for you. Me, I start on the furthest point and I work my way in. But whether you start in up close and go outward or the other way, just pick a process and stick to it. You'll find yourself much better able to put it all together to where it makes sense. You also want to keep in mind that when you get back to your workstation, you may have a couple of hundred photographs. If you don't have some process putting those together, it's going to be hard to look at those photos and tell automatically which one represents what, even for you if you took those. So find yourself a system that works where you make notes on a pad about number 1 is X, number 2 is X. Now, what I like to do is I like to take pictures from different distances, work my way in closer, 300, 200, 150 feet from a point of impact, things of that nature. So I'll sometimes make notes you know, starting out, this was 300 feet. The next one is 200 and 150. So I've got my notes. When I'm looking at these pictures, I can find my notes to know how I did those. Also, make notes sometimes on the position you took those photographs, so then you can reference those when you mount and label them about your perspective. If you got something up close or small, a gouge mark in the roadway like we see in this photograph here, put your tape measure down there. That gives people an excellent picture of the size of that area you're referring to. Otherwise, that thing could be 3 inches across or 3 feet across. You really can't tell if you have nothing to compare it to. So use tools, whatever you have. If you only have an ink pen, use that. At least give people a little idea of the perspective of that. Okay, so you're at the scene, you finished your sketch, measurement, taking your photographs. Are you ready to go? Maybe. But I always think that it's better to spend a few extra moments reviewing the notes and the work that you've completed and see if there's anything you might be missing. Now, one key thing I always like to do is to look for potential witnesses. Whether I know the facts or not, there's never going to be any harm in finding a witness that gives you something you didn't already have. Maybe they just corroborate what you already know. But it's a good rule of thumb to do that while you're at the scene. You're there, make good use of your time. So if it's a residential area, I'm going to start knocking on doors. Maybe knock on 6 or 8 houses. If no one's there, then no one's there. But you've at least made the effort. If there are businesses, do that. Same thing at businesses. Go in there and ask them, were you working the date and time this occurred? Did you see anything? Maybe they didn't see someone, but these people may have talked to someone after the accident or before the accident. You never know if you don't ask. They could have some critical information. Maybe they saw the person in there and they were drinking alcohol before they went outside and left and had this collision. You just never know if you don't ask. So it's always good to look for witnesses. Now, another witness would be a camera. And everybody now seems to have cell phones and cameras. So while you're talking to them about witnesses, find out if anybody has cell phone footage, maybe of the aftermath of the scene. You just never know. It might be something that's very helpful to you. Surveillance cameras. Most businesses, a lot of homes now have surveillance cameras. Ask about that. Walk around looking up on buildings, see if you see anything like that. Traffic cameras. Those are an excellent tool. They don't always work, and some only point and specifically capture certain things. But again, if you don't ask, you won't find out whether there's any evidence there to help you or not. So document all that while you're there. Get as much information as you can. You can follow up with the city and other places to get traffic camera information and at least determine if there's something there to help you. So now you're back at your workstation, or maybe you do this in your car if you're proficient at that. I'm not, but wherever you do your work, you want to sit down and put all this together in some manageable report. So we're starting with the diagram. Now you should have your sketch notes that you took while you're at the scene, and I would always tell you, don't rely on hand drawing a diagram. That used to be acceptable 20 years ago. It's just not, for a number of reasons. So find yourself a program that works for you. I like to use Microsoft's Paint. That works for me. I've been told there are other programs that people like to use, and that's your preference, but find something which lets you do the things that you need to do, which you're going to need to do: straight lines, curved lines, circles, ovals, arrows. I like to use color. I'm big on using color because it helps draw your attention to what you want the focus to be about, whether it's the impact point, the direction of vehicles, obstructions, whatever. So find a software that lets you do all of that and use that, okay? Also, put that into a PDF format when you finish. Not everybody has the same software that you do, so put it into a generic format that everybody else can pull up and examine when you send it to them, okay? Another point, when you're putting that diagram together, make sure that all your notes, whether they're notes about street names, measurements, maybe do a legend for the vehicles. I like to do that where I'm showing this color vehicle is the insured vehicle, this color vehicle is the adverse vehicle, things of that nature. Make sure it all is put in there so that when you're holding the sheet of paper up there, if you print it out, all the writing is legible from that point of view. You don't want to put something together where they have to turn the page this way to read that, this way to read that, and that's very hard to understand when you're forced somebody to do that. So make sure that you put everything in there from the same perspective, okay? You want to make sure that all your measurements are legible. So maybe you need to draw a little arrow and put those measurements down here in the corner, a little window that you can make them bigger so they make sense. If you got a small area that you're trying to squeeze that measurement in there, the font's going to be so small, it'll be hard to read. So if you want to put it in there and then maybe do a blow up over here in the corner where you enlarge this place and put your measurements there, help the person reviewing your diagram to be able to understand it. It makes no sense to do a nice thorough job and then have the finished product so illegible that it's worthless, okay? You got to show points of measurements for those things we talked about earlier. Again, find a way to get that into your diagram to where it's visible and people can read what you're trying to talk about, okay? You want to show your vehicle paths? That's good. I like to do that on occasion if I know it, drawing little arrows, things of that nature. That's always helpful. If you don't know the path of the vehicles, I don't think it's a good idea just to speculate. So I would probably leave the vehicles out if I'm not fairly certain that I know their path they took. I'll just put the diagram with, because this is factual data that I documented. It's what I know to be true. It's not speculative. So that's what you want to confine your diagram to. Okay, just like you did a nice diagram in your software, made that a presentable document for the person you're reporting to, your photos are just as important and you need to spend just as much time. I'll probably spend more time on diagrams and photo mounting than any other part of my project when I'm doing the scene investigations, because that's important. It does no good to go out and do this work and get all this information if you can't put it in some way that you can convey it to the person you want. Okay, so the photographs are something which people don't always understand. Just because you take 150 photographs does not mean you have to include 150 photographs in your photo mounting report. You could if you think they're all appropriate, but look at each photograph, and if you think it's appropriate and it adds something, include it. If you got 3 photographs of the same thing and 2 of them don't add anything, then take 2 of them out. Just send the best one, okay? But pick out your photos, and when you decide these are the photos that I want to send, make sure you get them into an order that makes sense. I like to tell a story by starting the same way I do my assessment at the scene. I'm going to do the overview, an outside, way off point of view first, and I'm going to work my way in closer, okay? So my photograph report is going to be the same way. I like to show the perspective of the drivers. So if I've got a street and I want to show the driver approaching an intersection, if I started out at 600 feet and took a photograph every 100 feet at the accident scene, I'm going to mount those in a way that shows the exact same thing. It's going to start out and it's going to show this photo was taken at this street facing northwest, 600 feet southeast of the point of impact, if that's what I'm trying to convey. So you want to give the person the perspective of what you're facing, the direction you're facing, the street you're on, or the location you're at. If you're on a corner, southwest, southeast, north, south, northeast, whatever corner you're on, tell them that, and the direction you're facing and how far away you are. So again, they can go back out there and recreate that spot if they need to. If they want to get a better perspective later on, they can go to that exact spot and get an approximate point of view to see what you were trying to convey. Maybe they have some questions about it. That's what you're doing. You're giving them a good perspective. They can also take that information and put a dot on your diagram to have a better idea then of how that spot relates to the accident scene, when they can lay it all out. You could do that on your own diagram if you wanted to, if you thought it was appropriate, and I have done that on occasion, but that's something I'll probably only do on fatalities or very serious accidents, that kind of thing. You might do that. You want the photograph to tell the story that you're trying to convey. So if your story is this driver was driving this road and he should have been able to see the accident, should have been able to see that vehicle pull out long before he approached, that's what you want to convey. And you want to put your photographs in order so they tell that story. You're showing that driver's perspective, you're showing what's at the scene, you let everybody see what you're talking about and they can follow along. The photos should be in order, and don't jump around. Figure out the best order to put those in to tell the story and stick to it. Now, what else can you do once you finish these tasks? Well, some of the things you might consider is getting a history of the accident scene. If you think this is the intersection where it's a problem intersection, people disregard the traffic signal, they can't see the traffic signs, trees are overgrown, whatever, you think it might be a place where there's a lot of accidents, maybe you think that can help Go to the city agency that controls that, maybe the police department. You may do a little research, but find out where that information is contained and try to request a report. You should be able to get reports in most municipalities that will tell you exactly how many accidents have been reported in a particular intersection over a period of time. And from that, you can extract other data. So that stuff is available if you think it will be helpful. Getting a Google overview photograph is good if you have a unique intersection. You want to be able to see the perspective from far away, and you just can't get far enough away when you're doing your scene investigation. The Google overview photograph is very helpful for that kind of stuff. If you want to get any, you want to document maybe that there's been some changes to the intersection. Google sometimes can help you with that, as well as the city people that you get the accident data from. They can also help you with that. If you think that maybe the layout is different now than it was when the accident occurred, that'd be helpful to know when it changed to make sure you know what changes took place. Well, I hope you found the video today to be helpful for the next time you do an accident scene investigation for an automobile accident. If you did find it to be helpful or informative, please consider liking it on YouTube. We'd also appreciate you checking out the other items on the FreeClaimInfo website. There are documents, guides, and other tools that you might find helpful. There's going to be a post on the message board for each video where there'll be questions, or you can post questions on there that we will try to answer, or maybe someone else in our community will answer those for you. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.